Hi everyone. So we are doing the Snow White trailer review, and obviously the movie hasn't come out, and it's supposed to come out March 21st. So this movie features Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, right? Yeah, Miss. So very. I mean, it looks pretty cool. I don't know. This poster looks cool. This is the. I think this is one of the posters for the movies. You can see the evil queen, or I should say, the hag, handing the apple to Snow White. And um, if you've seen the movie, or or if you've heard of the story, it's a pretty simple story. And I'm curious to see, I guess, how similar the movie will be. And now I'm just taking a look at this poster here. Yeah, you have these critters. One thing I did notice, so I'm gonna go through this. I'm gonna go through the trailer and just talk about, I guess, my impressions on it. I love the. I mean, it doesn't. One thing I notice is the queen kind of doesn't look like the queen in a lot of these pictures. So we'll talk about that. And but yeah, another thing. So let's get started. So the first scene, we see Snow White, and she's kind of brooming, right? So they're starting off with the whole storyline with, I guess she has a father, and then she, it's kind of like Cinderella, I guess. And I don't know. I mean, I don't remember the original. I haven't seen the original Snow White in a while, so I don't remember if that was part of the original story, or if that's something. I don't know if it's necessary to show that, but it obviously it adds some character. I'll be curious to see just how, just where what they choose to emphasize, what they choose to de-emphasize. So in the next scene, I guess it shows like the father, Snow White and her father kind of. Apparently, she had the kingdom, and then they inherited, or maybe the evil queen inherited it. Now, is that part of maybe I should have read the fairy tale first, but I didn't. Whatever. This is the movie, and this is kind of like the Cinderella story, and the even like Beauty and the Beast. The original Beauty and the Beast had the father and the daughter, inheriting, and then the step parent coming in. It's a very common. It's a common theme in these stories, and I think, presumably, now I don't know how this movie will show it, but in a lot of stories, there is something tragic. I guess I'll just speak on that a little bit. There is something tragic about, a parent or a father, right? Like a father falls in love, and fathers, I know this sounds weird, but fathers don't always understand how relationships work. Like fathers, they obviously care for their kids, but a lot of times, when they marry a woman, they don't, that men fall in love, right? And so that's one thing, right? So presumably, right, the father might fall in love with his stepmother or another woman that is not the mother of the children. And, this causes, there's a naivete because the father sometimes might, want to bring sort of happiness because maybe they think, oh, the child is lonely. And the tragedy, of course, is that, another woman is not going to love the child the same way. It doesn't have the same priorities. And I think a lot of men, a lot of fathers, they're very giving. So obviously he's giving, and they gave a lot to a stepmother. Now, I don't know, I'm talking about this because this is more like Cinderella's story and Beauty and the Beast. Well, the original Beauty and the Beast. But I don't know how it'll play out in this movie, so I don't know how relevant it is to this movie. But I still want to talk about just how there is a tragic element to that, right? Where these fathers who have a lot of power a lot of times, they've accumulated wealth. Obviously, the father has accumulated wealth, but, that kingdom, he thinks that, the stepmother is going to sort of give to the daughter the same, it will give to the daughter, that same, that she will be fair, I guess, with the daughter and treat her the way that she would her own daughter. But maybe, that's not always the case. And sometimes that's impossible to know. And that's kind of the cause of so many issues in life, right? Where parents, they don't always understand the motivations of people who are outsiders. And it also shows the power of, kind of the bond that family, that familial, sort of the blood. There's something unique about the family that is different from anyone else. Like your parents are, no one will ever truly love you or give you as much of a pass or as much, they will never show you as much love as your parents. And, for better or worse, I think sometimes that is actually the basis of so many movies. Now, that being said, of course, sometimes you might have a lonely person who falls in love, right? Falling in love it can be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing too, because falling in love it basically gives a free pass to the person that's being loved, and they might be good or bad, and you don't know how the other person will use that power. So in this case, the father is, now I don't know this movie. I mean, is she related to her? I don't even know. I don't even know if this even applies to this movie, but I kind of went on a tangent there just because, the whole stepfather, they seem to be bringing up the stepfather. I'm not sure, or in this case, her father, and the kingdom that he had, and I guess she's running away. I don't know. I don't remember if that was the original Snow White or if what this movie will be, but, it's kind of what it reminded me of. And it is a tragedy, and it also shows kind of how every relationship, the reason why relationships happen in life is because of the bonds that we have, and there's a reason why people come together, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, all right, let's look at this. So there it is. There's another video of her. I'm assuming that's her and her father. So, and then, it looks like the wishing well. All right, so yeah, I love the wishing well song in the original Snow White. So it's nice to see. I'm assuming that's what this is. And so let's go on. I mean, as you can tell, it's very ornate. These movies, they look pretty cool, actually, because they don't, I guess, with the power of CGI nowadays, and I presume, the generative AI and all this, it really makes very intricate worlds that would not have previously been possible, you know what I mean? So they don't have to film it. That's why you're going to see it's very intricate, lots of foliage. It's good. I mean, it looks good, right? It feels like Lord of the Rings, It feels like a very high budget film. Now, sometimes I think they kind of go overboard with it. So here's the castle. And I think the original Disneyland castle was supposed to be Snow White's castle. So that might, I don't know. But of course, then they changed it because at the time, apparently Sleeping Beauty was coming out. And so that's why it's now the Sleeping Beauty castle. But so anyway, this is an original kind of castle concept. I do like it. I don't remember how the original movie had it. But, these movies, I've noticed that, kind of Disney is kind of taking liberties with these movies. And they're not so literal. Like, if you remember when Cinderella came out, like the first movies, even up till like Beauty and the Beast, they really went kind of step by step, almost a recreation of the movie. But this right here, it looks like, they're not going to be doing that. And it looks like they're kind of adding to it. And, and I'm okay with that. But it also shows that, it's almost like Disney got tired of just doing a straight remake. And like I said, or like I've said in other videos I've made, um, movies can be adapted in different ways. Sometimes you want to bounce off of ideas from from another source, or sometimes you want to go in a different direction. And I think both work. They both work, and I'm okay with them doing something different, to be honest. So I don't mind that. Now I do want to say Snow White. Let's see what the next shot is. So these are all just sort of images from the trailer. And, the original movie, I mean, going back to this, Walt Disney, Snow White was his first full-length film. Now, Walt had been working on many other cartoons, so it wasn't his first attempt at making animated productions, because he had a lot of practice by this time. But it was the first kind of animated film, and it was the first kind of concept like that, because people back then, during the 30s and 20s, they didn't think to make a full length cartoon in that way, and also they didn't quite understand the power that cartoons could have. And at the time, because it was so expensive to make visual effects, the cartoon medium actually turned out to be sort of one of the best ways to bring life to stories. And that's exactly what happened. And not only that, but the characters themselves, the way they move, and you can just do things that, you can't really have a talking animal and have it be convincing and be in a sort of live action format. But when it's a cartoon, it works. And so many elements of the original Snow White he really did revolutionize the film industry. And the original Snow White is also, I mean, it obviously holds a special place in Walt Disney's history and in his career. And there a lot of thought and care was placed into it. And in a way, maybe it's better, I guess, that it's just kind of be its own thing, because it's beautiful. It brings about, I really think Walt Disney, with the original Snow White, really wanted to bring out the, sort of good versus evil. And like, it's gutsy. It's not a film. It's not just a kiddie throwaway film. It actually is a scary film in some ways. It's actually for adults too. It's not just for children. It is and even this is in keeping with the original Grimm's fairy tales. The fairy tales, they were for kids, but they were for a younger audience, but they were also very focused on I guess the standards back then were different, and back then they weren't afraid to tell real stories. I guess back then everyone just told real stories. So even for younger audiences, they still told real stories. They didn't see the point in saying something that didn't have some level of truth, or at least your interpretation of truth. So with Walt Disney, it's amazing how he was able to put, it's scary because the witch is trying to destroy, is trying to snuff out Snow White, literally, and it's not it's not just like a small quabble. It's actually there's actually stuff at stake here. There is Snow White is an actual is not. She's not safe. And so all of this, and it's not just one time, it's a recurring thing. And I think Walt wanted that to be there, a part of the film. He wanted it to be a part of the story, to get people emotionally invested. And actually, in the original movie, like Snow White, really, people were crying at the end of it. Like, that's how, testimonies, because it actually, for a minute, you were pulled into sort of the perfect good and then thrashed into the world of darkness, into the world of where where all of a sudden everything from scariness to it's about life. It's a lot of themes that you wouldn't think would be explored, and that's kind of what makes Snow White a film for everybody. So here we see the Queen. Okay, very good. And Gal Gadot, she looks really good in this film. Now, like I said, the only thing, I look at this outfit, it kind of doesn't look like the outfit. Believe it or not, I wish they had added a little bit of color to it. Or, I think it's more purplish in the original. It's missing a little bit of that. It's a little too... It looks great, but once again, it looks very clean. There's something about these CGI world. They make it so clean. I mean, is it the same thing with the castle? Look at that. Look at that clean castle, right? If only Cinderella castle looked like that in Florida or, in Disneyland, if they put this much effort. Like, they're looking like they're in shambles, but this looks look how clean it looks. It looks beautiful. Yeah, so, but yeah, I guess that's one of the perks of being, of making films making films, it sometimes makes it too clean, but how hard would it be to actually keep it this clean? Like, it's so weird. It's so crazy how, why haven't we invented ways to, quickly clean things, Like, I wish you could just power wash or, find an easy way to clean, bathrooms. And I feel like technologically, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but, our society, there's so much, we build so many things that are just dingy. And it takes too much effort, and somebody actually has to scrub to clean some of this stuff. And I wish that, do you know what I mean? I wish that we would pay attention to maintenance. How can we maintain better? My idea, and I know this is where I'm going off way on a tangent here, but we should have bathrooms that you could just power wash. You know what I mean? You shouldn't even have to scrub it. And that would make our world so much better, so much easier, so much cleaner. But anyway, yeah, so it's very clean room. Evil Queen. What is her name? Is it? I can't remember. I don't know if she has one. But anyway, nice colorations. I think she had purple. Purple was the coloration originally, but now it's green, I guess. See, here she doesn't really look like the Evil Queen to me, but I don't know. A very nice profile of Snow White. And now this here, the meeting, I don't know if, in the original movie, do they even meet? I don't think they do. And I don't think they meet. And I feel a little weird that Snow White and the Queen are kind of meeting each other. In a way, I always felt like Snow White would be better if Snow White didn't know, sort of, because really the Evil Queen in the original film and the original fairy tale story, she's full of envy and covetous. She wants what she has. And the way I always interpret it is that sort of that she's losing her beauty, right? As women, she's older, she's wiser, but she's losing her beauty to a younger sort of generation. And so that there is this sort of envy that is in her, and realizing that perhaps she's not going to experience, and her time has passed, I guess, and at least in terms of what we would typify as beauty, right? Or the story of I guess a young woman's life, right? Where it's weird how it is, but young women, they start off the most beautiful, the most in some ways, and the most influential when they're the young, when they're 18, right? As soon as they reach of age, right? When they come of age, right? When they are an adult in society, right? A woman, it's kind of in a sense she's at her pinnacle, and then when you look at Rachel, or when you look at the Queen, she's presumably older. Now this story would work better, and I don't know. I know I was talking before about how the father and with the stepmother. I don't know if that even is a thing in this movie. But I think it would have been better if they didn't really know each other. And actually, we don't really even need the father, to be honest with you, to tell the story of how a woman can be envious and covetous over another woman. And covetous means to want something that you can never have, or that you can, which in this case, her beauty, right, her youth. You can't have, you can't bring back your youth in the same way. It's just not the same. And so it's nice. It'll be. I don't know what the themes. I'm kind of adding my own themes here, so I don't actually know what the themes here are going to be. So at this point, I'm speculating. So here is Rachel Zegler as Snow White. Very nice. Like, I don't. Like, obviously the clothing is a little different from the movie. I'm not sure why. We'll see. I guess we'll have to see what her place is and what's happening here. But like I said, I do. I don't know. I think it's okay. I mean, people have asked, like, what about Snow White, right? Like, right. I mean, the story, obviously, in the original story, you have, her lips are red as apples or whatever. Her lips are very red. Her hair, I think, is supposed to be as black as raven, right? So very shiny or whatever. And then her skin is white as snow, right? So that's why her name is Snow White. And honestly, I don't know. I know people have asked or have wondered, like, what is the, if people, when it comes to the skin, right? Like, how do you deal with that? And does it really matter? And in my view, I don't think it has to matter, because, like I said, it's up to interpretation, right? Now, yes, in the original film, or in the original story, actually, the skin is part of it. But at the same time, I also believe it's, it can be taken metaphorically. And there's no reason why someone who, I'm not necessarily opposed to someone who is not necessarily, of the whitest skin to play the role, because it, the fairness of the skin, the whiteness of the skin is not necessarily, that's not the only way to interpret that phrase. So that's what I think of it. So I don't really have a problem with the skin itself. And like I said, and I guess as I would say, so I think even someone who, even someone who is of any kind of person could play the role appropriately and still have it be titled Snow White, simply because it doesn't have to carry on that literal meaning. It could be metaphorical. It could, and the other thing too is that, in terms of how a character is, how a character is portrayed, I think that's always, you would be surprised how the way that an actor can carry that role is powerful enough. Like, you can believe it. You can make it work, is what I'm saying. And so I would be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Rachel Zegler performs this. And I know a lot of people, I don't know, this movie has garnered some attention all over the place. I think when it comes to art, I like to judge the art, and at the end of the day, I'm grateful to have artists and actors and producers and writers working on a project, and that's something to celebrate. Now, I don't, we'll see what comes of it. I don't know. I can't say for sure what happens, but generally speaking, I don't. But like I said, I don't think there's an issue with the casting of the role of Snow White. And I think in some ways, I guess this leads to the next scene. This is, the Snow White. Okay, this is the evil queen. Kind of looking at her. And so this movie seems to add different things. One of the themes, or I'll talk about this later, I guess, with, the fairest of them all. Here she talks about the kindness. Now, she's saying she's mouthing kindness. This is in the trailer. And I don't remember if is that one of her attributes? I don't remember. And I don't remember if in the original film that's something. But in this film, let me see if I can get to that role. This is her. Oh, I can't remember what the queen is saying here. but I just liked this picture. So I like the way she's mouthing. Gal Gadot does a really good job of, obviously she looks like she could be like, one of those supermodels, like a Miss Universe or something. So obviously Gal Gadot, the evil queen, has to be beautiful, and it works well. And this is what I wanted to talk about. So here's the evil queen, and here's the magic mirror. The mirror on the wall. I don't know if magic mirror is the correct name. That's what they call this this mirror. Now in the mirror, so in the original film, an original fairy tale, it's the queen asks the mirror asks, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And by fairest, the word in English, for people who perhaps don't speak English or may not understand the meaning, the word fair means pretty, right? Now I don't know. I guess I'd have to look into the original German, because the Grimm brothers wrote in German. So I'm not sure exactly what the original German definition is, or what word they use for that. But in English, when they say the fairest of them all, he's talking about who's the prettiest, is basically what he's, or I should say that's what the queen is asking the mirror. Like, mirror, mirror, who is the fairest? Who's the prettiest? Who looks the prettiest? Basically, fair meaning beautiful, or something that's right, that's correct. And now, of course, the word fair also means sort of, it also refers to the snow white skin, right? So the fair skin, it has come to mean that as well in the English language. It doesn't, but yeah, so it has come to mean that. So that's kind of another meaning for fair. So it could be beauty, it could be the fairness, how white the skin is. So like a really pale white is called fair skin. But that's more of a linguistic terms, but that kind of works with the story, right? Like Snow White. And perhaps that may have influenced. I don't know of any etymologists out there who, like, perhaps that might be one of the reasons why we use it, because it's described in the fairy tale that the Snow White is the fairest, right? Her skin is as fair as snow. It is as white as snow. And then to call her the fairest of them all, so, it's like fairest equals white as snow skin. And so, I can see how that perhaps could have influenced the meanings. But when you think about it, the Snow White, again, the sort of the skin being fair, it kind of works with what they're saying, right? Where it's like, well, who is the prettiest? And then it just so happens that she has Snow White, right? That she is Snow White. And the thing is, so this is also a sign of youth, right? If you really want to think of it that way, because, right, as you get older, your skin presumably gets sunlight. And so usually when you're a baby, right, when you're young, you start off with like this kind of milky skin, right? Because you haven't been exposed to the sun. And then as you get older, so that kind of plays into the youthfulness. And it also plays into, I guess, beauty standards, right? Back in when the Grimm brothers were writing the story during the 1800s in Germany, it would have been like, having the whitest skin was kind of seen as a sign of a woman who had just entered, who had come of age, right? And so it just represented beauty. It represented beauty. It represented all of that. And so now let me talk about the fairest, the other word. So there's three meanings. The other meaning, which I think is kind of funny. But before I talk about that, I want to talk the other thing too about, the idea of, going back to what I said with the skin. And, when it comes to, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, so what one person thinks is beautiful, another person, might prefer something else. And it's weird how that works. And since we're talking about love and we're talking about skin and we're talking about, all of this, it kind of, I think people need to realize that it's like it really, when a man falls in love, right? So there is the Prince Charming, right? So who I don't know how that's going to play out in this movie, but I guess that we'll be surprised by that. But when a man falls in love, it kind of, the girl becomes kind of the center of the world, and everything falls apart from that. And so, and this is something that's worth mentioning because, the evil queen, obviously, if there's a Prince Charming that's falling in love, the Prince Charming is not falling in love with her, right? And so so I guess what I'm saying is that, that's why when I said, the idea of Snow White and people, sort of castigating Rachel Zegler because, she doesn't fit the Snow White attribute, right? Or the description. But the thing is, like, when a man falls in love, it is, she does become, and I think it's worth noting that she's not just white, she's kind of Snow White, right? Kind of, in other words, it's like, we're not talking about just a normal skin anymore. We're not just talking about normality. We're talking about a sort of sublime and higher level, and really, in some ways, like I said, metaphorical meaning, so that, if we're a man to fall in love, right, it changes their reality. And so all of a sudden, what other people might not realize, in his eyes, in the eyes of a Prince Charming, Rachel Zegler would be Snow White. She would be like as white as snow. Even though everyone else, in Germany or whatever, back in the 1800s, whenever the Grimm's fairy tale, right, everyone else would be white, but this girl, all of a sudden, she's Snow White, and it doesn't even matter what she looks like or it just matters how they feel, because in that sense, it's from the narratives, I guess, if you want to talk about it, from narrative or the omniscient narrative, right? The third person, when we're reading a story. So basically, us as a reader, we're taken in, and also presumably the Prince Charming is also like, this is what they're experiencing. So when we read these descriptions, they are, you need to see them as symbols of how they feel, and not necessarily the literalism, right? Because sometimes, have you ever talked to someone and they're like, oh my gosh, and you can tell that this person has been in love for quite a while with this person, and then you look at them and it's kind of like, they kind of look, to you, they look like just some average person, but to that person, they mean the world, and for that man, presumably. And this also, like I said, this is a tragedy, right? Because this is something that I think a lot of women might not understand, right? It's not really an instinct for a woman, in my view, to just fall in love deeply with a person like that. Most women, they reserve that more for children, for their own offspring, to say, right? So that the love of a mother is intense, right? A mother sees her own offspring different than any other person, right? No one, and that kind of, doesn't that fall into the whole theme of what we're talking about here, right? Where, right, a stepmother can never love a daughter the same way that an actual mother does. That's kind of the way that it happens a lot. And so in a way, it becomes kind of this absolute thing. And that's something that I think, and that's what the queen is missing, right? That's what she wants. Why aren't you falling in love with me that way, right? But what's weird is, of course, that that maybe Snow White's father was the one that fell in love. Who knows, right? Fell in love with the queen. Now, I don't know if that's how the story plays out here, but do you see how it all connects in a weird way? But what I'm trying to say is that in the eyes of someone who is in love, no matter what her skin, or no matter what she looks like, or no matter what you think, maybe you don't think these facial features are, your what you would consider to be beautiful, but it doesn't matter because when someone falls in love, she is as white as snow, right? She is fitting that. So that's really what it's about. And so the fairness, she becomes the most beautiful. Now, in speaking of fairness, so let's go back to that. That's kind of funny because I can't remember what part of the trailer they talk about it, but there's a part where it might be here where Snow White, the character of Snow White, she's like, I'm going to be the fairest, or what did she say? And that's taking on a different sort of a third interpretation or a third possible explanation of the word fair. So we talked about fair being the prettiest, fair being the whiteness of the snow or the skin, which the symbolism behind that. And then the third, fairness, which is being fair in terms of like we need to spread kindness. Where is that? Yeah, this is the kindness. Yeah, she's saying kind. I tried to stop it, but whatever. So the kind, right? Now presumably she's talking about that perhaps the subjects of the kingdom are not being treated fairly by the queen. And so she's like, we need to, presumably they need the kindness. So we're talking about fairness. And what I was saying is, when it comes to fairness, I thought it was funny how the trailer, I guess, it puts a spin on the whole term of fairness, because now it's like, the fairest of them all, meaning not the fairest as in the prettiest or the fairest as in the whitest skin, but also the fairest in terms of that she's going to treat, the people more fairly, right? That she'll be sort of, presuming that the queen is not being fair. And that's kind of a funny interpretation of the word fair, right? Because I guess I've never thought of that. And that's probably because, the original film and story, they don't really, I don't remember if that is part of the story, but in the original film, it certainly wasn't the emphasis, right? So the idea that, she's the fairest, she's going to treat people fairly. I don't remember if that is a theme in the original film, but in this film, obviously that's going to be part of it. And it works, right? It works because it's, it has the word fair. She's the fairest. That's a good way of thinking about, the dynamics of a kingdom and the ruling and governance of a kingdom, right? To think of fairness. Now, I will say one criticism I guess I could have is, I don't know that a young person would necessarily understand, how to rule or govern without, very strong principles behind it, behind what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing. So that's, I guess that would be one little quibble that I would have. I'm not sure, that I would trust someone who is presumably very young with understanding how to achieve that fairness, right? Because really, when it comes to governance, everyone wants to have hopefully a stable society, but how do you achieve that is really the crux of the issue. It's kind of there are just different ways of achieving that. And so but anyway, nevertheless, so that there is a little bit of I feel like because a movie like this I don't think would be properly able to explore what it means to be fair in that regard. And so I don't know. Yeah, I'm not. It's very superficial, the fairness in that sense. And so I think I don't know, and not to mention the vagary behind it, right? Like, what exactly does it mean to be fair? What? I'm not sure, right? Like, are you gonna, elevate some and downplay others? Like, it's just hard to understand what it means, right? And so I don't know that this movie would explore that, but nevertheless, it works, right? It works with what the story is. And so in that sense, it's interesting. It'll be, it's just kind of funny, I guess. It just so happens that that she can be fairer than her. Um, but like I said, it doesn't hold as much weight. Like, because I don't think that, I don't know. I just don't trust that a younger person would necessarily be equipped to do that. But, you'd have to prove yourself, I guess. We don't really know enough about each of these characters to know. It reminds me of Star Wars, Episode 1. Queen Amidala, in the lore of Star Wars, apparently, they had like these queen rulers that were very young. And, obviously they were surrounded by lots of councils and counselors and, people who, and it was perhaps more ceremonial in that sense, but still, they had some power. And so it's entirely possible for, a young woman to reign with the help of, strong, or I don't know if strong is the word, but surrounded by people who could provide guidance. And as a matter of tradition, it wouldn't be unrealistic, to do that. But anyway, I don't know that any of that is relevant here, but I thought it was interesting that they brought a little bit of that, which, a little bit of that governing, a little bit of the kingdom and the sort of royalty, the what am I trying to say here? I can't remember the word. But yeah, the monarchy, I guess monarchical concepts, which I think is not usually explored in Disney movies. But okay, it's interesting to see them bringing that up. And here we have the Queen, once again, very nice. She kind of looks like Kim Kardashian here. I don't know. But yeah, very nice. Like I said, it doesn't really look like the original Evil Queen. I feel like it's missing the color. She almost looks like Maleficent, But yeah, I think maybe she needed the purple tunic or whatever she wears. It's very shiny. Here she kind of looks like Catwoman in some of the videos, like from behind, because of how shiny it is. Like Michelle Pfeiffer in Catwoman. In one of the Batmans, I guess that's if you don't know about Batman. But yeah, so here she is. She's kind of holding her neck. It looks a little menacing, right? Like, I don't know. You kind of have to trust someone to, put their hands around your neck like that. So yeah, it's but like I said, interesting choices. She looks a little too generic, but I don't know. I would have liked it if she looked a little more maybe purplish, more like the queen, the evil queen, but I don't know. That's one thing that we haven't really talked about is the color. Walt Disney, his use of color is amazing in the original Snow White movie, the 1939, or is it 1939? I can't remember. I may be misquoting that. But yeah, like Walt Disney, it's amazing how the use of color is one of the things that I love about the film. And this film is kind of lacking in that department. It doesn't look as colorful, but I guess they're kind of going for the realism, so maybe that's why. This is one of the scenes with the animals. Again, one of the weird, or, another example of a kind of muted colors, but you can see how in these, I noticed that the animals, they're very lively, and they were in the original film as well. And I don't know that it has the same effect as when the original Snow White came out, because when the original Snow White was released, it was just such a treat to see animals kind of moving around and being kind of characters alongside the main protagonist, a human protagonist. And so I don't know that this, seeing the animals now, we're so accustomed to that. When it first came out, when Walt first released Snow White, it was a big deal. It would have been amazing, and it would have been kind of funny actually, because animals, it's impossible to get animals to do that in live action. But and so now seeing it here in film, it's fun to see that. Obviously, it's a fun part of the movie, and it's fun to see a return to sort of that original that original movie sequence with the animals kind of flying around, flittering about Snow White. And then here's the queen, okay, looking down. A very nice shot, by the way. This same thing as the original movie, but now this right here, I mean, we can see just how, I mean, I would say it's a little strange because it's not entirely realistic, right? And I mean, a chipmunk would never smile at you like that, right? And a turtle, like crocodiles, they smile, but a smile does not necessarily mean happiness with an animal. And I mean, at least I don't think so. So it's a little weird. I mean, normally if an animal is showing their teeth, it's actually a sign of, it's the opposite. It's actually a sign of, they're baring their teeth. It's like a snake. If a snake is opening its mouth, it means it might bite you, right? It might hurt you. So normally if a squirrel opened its mouth, it's kind of like, you would normally be a little afraid of it. But I guess in this movie, once again, they're anthropomorphized, right? And that means that they're kind of like humans. They're treating them like humans, even though in real life, animals are not humans, I don't think. They don't necessarily have the emotions, but, they move around like us. And so, what I think is interesting is, I mean, Walt Disney had flowers with faces on it, but they might as well put, if they put animals smiling, why not have a plant smiling too, right? They used to have flowers that were smiling, right? Just asking, just questions like, or why not have the rocks talking and smiling too? I mean, it makes just as much sense in my view. So that's just how I see it. Like, they're great, but ultimately, I don't know if the animals talk in this movie, but in some of the movies, obviously the animals become kind of they become like a human, so to speak, you can describe humans as being like animals, right? Like, have you ever met someone who kind of reminds you of a frog, or someone who kind of reminds you of who's jittery and kind of like a squirrel, or somebody who is very slow and quiet like an elephant? There are people who sometimes you can be described as animal-like, right? And I think that's, in that sense, I guess it kind of makes sense when films use animals to represent humans, so to speak. And so now in this movie, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, and I don't know if Walt necessarily meant that, but there is that symbolism, right? So the animals sort of represent people, and in that regard, it's weird because nowadays for some reason we literally take animals as actually being, I feel like in a lot of movies, the animals have kind of taken on their own life in a way that I don't know that it was always, interpreted that way, or that it could be interpreted that way. But in this movie, I think the animals are just kind of friendly just for their own sake. And here's another scene, okay, like a really cute, a cute little, I guess a bunny. And there's a kind of a bigger rabbit. Again, like their eyes, they do look cute. In some cases, they almost don't match, like the reality, right? Like they're kind of bending, what looks cute versus what looks real, right? So it's not 100% realistic, but that's kind of part of the fantasy. And I understand. Obviously, it makes people smile. It makes you, it's kind of funny, I guess, seeing human emotions in animals or plants or anything else like that. So let me see where I ended up here. Okay. There's my little map here. So this is Snow White with her little bluebird. Now, this was also in the original film, so this is a classic. It's sometimes Disney feels the need in some of these live action films to just do, go through some of the the main scenes, the iconic moments, which I like. It represents Snow White, I guess, being kind even to the smallest, right? Like birds are not ever going to get, they're not going to get married the same way that a human will, and they're not necessarily going to enjoy things the same way that we do, right? There's a difference, right? There's the use of animals as imagery. It shows that animals, they're really not. Yeah, I mean, she could just ignore them, right? And this is kind of meant to highlight her character, that she's kind even to the smallest, right? Even to the things that you would think are insignificant, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we build, humans build societies, they build machines, but, really these animals, they're kind of just watching. They're almost like ants when you think about it. A bird is like an ant. And, and we talk about like bird brain, like, and I don't mean that, I mean it more literally, I guess. Like, a bird's brain is really small, right? How small is a bird's brain? How much understanding can a bird actually have? But really, when you think about it, like seeing Snow White sort of extend her hand, and I think it's more symbolic. Obviously, it's not literal, but the symbolism behind it is that you care for the lowliest person. And again, once I said before about how animals can sometimes become visual interpretations of humans. And so in that sense, it represents, if you are a high and lofty, if you are someone of power, meeting someone who comes from a more simpler background, they can be like birds, they might not necessarily have the significance or the power to do as much. And not only that, but all humans, we kind of come in all different, with different mental faculties, right? And so we're not, and should they, and how should you treat people like that, and so it's a nice moment in the original film and in this trailer. So here it is. Here's the animals again. There's her. And then the animals are scampering in, which, I mean, in real life, I don't think any one of us would, we would be startled by this, right? Animals can have diseases, they can have parasites, they can have all kinds of, you wouldn't want them running around in your house, but, this is a movie, and they can, it doesn't have to be literal in that sense. Okay, look, like animals, I mean, in real life, this would be like, it would be very scary to have animals, coming in. And sometimes these animals can bite, like when they feel threatened. So you do need to be careful. There's reasons to be scared. But again, this is a film. Notice how the animals we can tell that they're friendly. The smile, I guess, is meant to tell us that we are not, we're not looking at, like, these are not normal animals, basically. I mean, normally you wouldn't do this, but again, it's a movie, okay? So this I thought was interesting. Look at these wooden, so these are stairs. It's kind of a side profile of stairs, and these are her red shoes and her yellow dress. Like I said, I love the color of the dress. I love the color that Walt gave the princess, because it's not a color that you would normally associate with royalty, and yet it fits so well. I love the coloring of Snow White, and I love the textures of everything. Now, here's the thing. In the original, I remember in the original Snow White attraction, the Snow White Scary Adventure, which they have at Disneyland, and they also had a Disney World, a Walt Disney World, but the one in Disneyland, they kind of changed it now, and it's sort of, it has it's now Snow White's, what is it called? Enchanted Wish or something? So I kind of like the original, but what I love about it is that in the attraction, they have these wooden carvings are preserved. They have kind of these interesting carvings, and I never thought about the symbolism behind it, but really it's the dwarfs, I guess. The dwarves are the ones that kind of carve these things, and so I love just how rustic and how almost cartoonish. Like it's interesting to me. I don't, I wish, I guess maybe I should have looked at the original movie, but I love just how, even though it's meant to represent a habitation of a human, right? Or of, of a live action world, it's still almost, there's a cartoonishness to the dwarves, that even though they're humans, but they're not completely humans, right? Even Walt made them look like they're so out of, their heads are so big, and they really are not human, they're almost like cartoons come to life. They don't fit. They don't look like, I mean, if you look at how Snow White and the prince and the evil queen look, like how all the humans look in the original film, right? If you look at how they look very realistic. And I think there is something deliberate about that. But then when it comes to the dwarves, they're kind of funny. They're drawn in a funny style. And they almost look like cartoons. So the humans look real, but the dwarves look like cartoons. And it's a great decision because it makes them so much funnier. And it allows them to do like silly gags that in a normal human would look horrible, right? Like imagine if Snow White, did some of the gags that they do where with the water, they're when they're eating and when they do some they have Dopey, right? One of the dwarves. There's 7 dwarves, and one of them is Dopey, and they have all of the dwarves. They just do kind of ridiculous things that would be scary if a human did it, but because they're cartoons, they can get away with it. And so it was a good call for Disney to make, to digitally create these more cartoonish characters that are not necessarily human, because they really do extraordinary things. And I love how this house is reflective of that. I love the wood paneling, and in the original attraction that is still available in Disneyland, I believe that they have these wood carvings, and that's why it's so evocative for me, because it shows, it's almost like the dwarves built it, like the dwarves kind of had fun with it, and you can tell how much they love. It's kind of a house that represents not only the color of of the joie, what they call the joie de vivre, or however you say that, joie de vivre, which is it means the joy of living, right? So it shows kind of this happiness that is within them, but also how they bring kind of the forest into the home, and the home and the forest, like I said, it doesn't represent necessarily the animals in their literariness, but it represents kind of humanity, right? Like we are, just like that bird, that lowly bird. Where's that bird? Oh, let's see that bird. That lowly bird is, is a symbolism for a lowly human, that might not necessarily have the biggest power, but to see that represented and welcomed into the home, or they're not just welcomed into the home, they're bringing Snow White into this home, and the home itself is a celebration of what is outside. And these look like owls carvings, but yeah, it's a celebration of that. So it's I love the symbolism of that. And these are the 7 dwarves, and the last one being a Dopey. So I do like that. It looks, this pretty much looks standard to the film. There is Snow White. She is tired. And I love, like I said, in real life, you wouldn't want to be around this. It would probably not smell good. But, this is a movie, and it allows us to, it shows how, she was kind and to the lowly bird before, and now the lowly bird is returning that love back. Okay, so the bird, you can see the bird here, just the bird is covering her now. So it works both ways. The love and that comes from a powerful person will be returned to the powerful person in other ways. And so it's symbiotic in that sense, and it's also It's wonderful, right? Like these animals, they recognize that the forest and the world will be better with someone like Snow White, and people extend themselves if you open yourself up. And really, Snow White, at the end of the day, Snow White is not just, it doesn't just represent the fairness of the skin or any of that, or the beauty, or or treating people with fairness. I think the goodness of the heart at the end of the day, right? One of the themes, just as and this is a theme that Walt himself um, intended, I think, in his original film, which is the good heart that balances out the evil queen. And the heart is what inspires everyone around her, and she changes the environment because of who she is. That is an integral part of her character. Now we'll see how the movie is if it still maintains that. But so here's a look at the dwarves. Now, as we can see, they're a little older, but like I said, they maintain that cartoonishness, and I like how. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm sure we'll see a lot of funny gags with them. This is a wonderful picture, of her dancing. I got this still shot, just in revelry, in absolute mirth, right? She's happy, she's jumping, she's skipping. I love that when when a group of happy people like the dwarves are able to meet someone who can appreciate that kindness and happiness. I love how the synergy that is created within them, and how they all are able to make something sort of celebratory happen upon their meeting each other. And that's really what the song is meant to represent. It's meant to represent, when you meet someone and kind of the sparks fly, sometimes it takes a while for this to happen. It doesn't always happen instantly. But eventually, when two people trust each other because they're trusting, well, in this case, she kind of just walked into the house, didn't she? Yeah, I can't even remember right now. But yeah, it's kind of like Goldilocks. She kind of just walked into the home. But either way, like, it's kind of, sometimes you have to celebrate in life, and it's not something that you can just force. You can't force a relationship. You can't really force, you can pretend if you want, but it's not going to be the same. And so I think when you see kind of a musical number like this, when Walt was making his film, and he was really just trying to capture what happens when people meet and they get along, and music is able to represent the feelings that we get when we in our feel that don't necessarily in real life, it's not music, but it feels like music, right? Have you ever walked in and it feels like there's a soundtrack playing, but it's not, but it feels like it, right? And here are the birds again. Notice how these birds, even though the birds, they're lowly, we talked about how lowly these birds are, but notice how when they want, they're capable of flying, they're powerful. They have a certain power to them. And all animals, or I should say all people, you would be surprised that even though someone, you might think their contribution is not as great, you'd be surprised that at the power and the influence that someone might have, an unexpected influence that you wouldn't realize. And sometimes you have to, that's why you kind of have to give people a chance. And that's what Snow White does, is she sees the good in everyone and tries to, and that's kind of part of having a good heart, right? It's the opposite of what the evil queen is doing, sort of desiring and wishing the best for others, as opposed to, wanting to take from others, or wanting to, it's, you know what I mean, wanting to, or wishing ill on others. But so this is a great shot, right? I love, like I said, the colors are great, and we can see the dwarves look great too. They look kind of colorful to me.